My paper is entitled Ethical Analysis of Learning Analytics in Implementing Interventions for Learner Performance. My paper takes an ethical analysis approach to the current use of big data technologies in education, specifically analyzing privacy and other concerns with regard to using predictive analytics to change the user's experience of the information. Despite being a new area of technology in instructional systems, there is a large amount of literature with regard to the use of predictive analytics. Much of the literature describes learning analytics. Learning analytics is the use of data to create a personalized adaptive learning experience. This can be applied to the individual, the course, a department, or an institution as a whole. This involves collecting large amounts of data about either a student or a group of students in an attempt to predict where there is a student that is at risk or predict a way in which a student will interact with course material. This is then used to create interventions that can make the learning experience more adaptive or better suited to different types of learners. The key ethical concern surrounding the use of learning analytics is with the additional data that is collected. The notion of data in regards to the student record is no longer confined to being test scores, grades, attendance, and that sort of thing. It is now expanded to include metadata, which is how information with regard to how the student interacts with the learning management system or with other aspects of the institution. This can include things that may seem benign, such as door access logs or things that can be used to track a student's interactions. These new uses of data are problematic because there's not a clear definition of who owns the data. Does the data belong to the student? Does it belong to the institution? If it does belong to the institution, how does that institution protect the privacy of the student? If it belongs to the student, then how does the institution ensure that they receive consent from the student to utilize their data for learning analytics purposes? In addition to student privacy, another area that is ethically ambiguous is that of student profiling. Learning analytics utilizes data to form a statistical model that can be used to create a profile of an average student. That data is then applied to attributes that real students exhibit and then attempts to implement interventions based on the type of group that a student fits into. There is not a one-size-fits-all guide in the literature to prescribe how we are to go about analyzing learning analytics solutions for their ethical context. Pardo and Siemens propose several principles to guide decisions regarding learning analytics. The first is transparency. Transparency is that students are aware that this process is occurring and are aware of how the data is Student control of data specifies that students have to have the ability to determine how their data is used, or if their data is to be used in any sort of learning analytics application. Right of access specifies that only people who absolutely have to have access to a student's data should have access to the student's data. Accountability requires that there is some level of oversight to the process by which the data is collected and used. New technologies can improve the educational experience for student engagement and can also detect students that are at risk and help them early. Predictive analytics can be applied in many situations and at various scales, but it is most easily applied in a learning management system where information about students is already gathered and where their activities can be monitored. Instructional designers, and administrators have a responsibility to ensure that student data is protected and the implementation of learning analytics do not cause any harm to students or in any way inhibit the educational process.